Welcome back to the Spatial Connection, the podcast where we explore the fascinating journeys of geospatial professionals and dive into the incredible ways location-based technologies are shaping our world. I'm your host, Kelly McGee, and today's guest is Brendan Wesdock. Brendan has an incredible story that began with a love for maps, a Commodore 64, and coding a geographic database at just 12 years old. From staring at a raised relief map in college to discovering GIS during an internship, he turned a lifelong passion for geography into an extraordinary career. From working with Rand McNally in the early days of digital mapping to leading major GIS projects for the military and transportation industry and guiding companies like GeoDecision and GeoCGI, his path is filled with innovation and impact. We'll hear the lessons learned and advice he has for the next generation of geospatial professionals. Stay tuned as we connect the dots of his remarkable geospatial journey. All right, hello everybody. Today we have Brendan Wesdock with us. I think Brendan's got a good story. We'll try to bring you another good story each time. Definitely looking forward to hearing from Brendan. I have talked to him too much in a while, and it's great getting caught up with him. I've known Brendan for quite a few years, and I'm going to let him kind of walk through his story to kind of learn a little bit about his journey as we go through this here. So Brendan, first of all, welcome. I'm glad you're able to be here. What I'd like to do is, if you could start off, maybe tell us a little bit about where you heard about or how you got involved with GIS. What was your initial introduction to it? Did you hear about it through a school, through work, or whatever? And then maybe lead us through, how you got your first job and kind of along your career path. With that, please kind of let us know how you got started.
Sounds good. Well, I'll start a little before where I first heard about GIS because it kind of starts when I was a kid. I really, I've always been involved with or love maps, love to look at maps, love to draw maps, do that kind of stuff. Even when I was 12, I got a Commodore 64. You probably remember those, Kelly. I got the whole the whole thing. I had the Commodore 64, the green screen monitor, I had a dot matrix printer and a data set to store data on, right? So the data set was just a cassette, you put in, it was, not even a floppy drive. It was just a, music cassette.
Cassette tape. Yeah.
Cassette tape. Yeah. So I had that and, you couldn't do anything with that unless you had programs or whatever. So, a lot of people at that time would buy PC Magazine, and PC Magazine had, programs that you would have to type everything in,
Yes.
save it off and do all that kind of stuff, all the code and everything. So that's where I first learned how to code. But one of the first programs I ever wrote it was essentially a big array, but I called it a database. And it was a list of all the countries and their geographic center coordinates. And I had this thing where you could put in, an interface where you could type in, you could start typing the name of the country and it would bring up the list of the countries. So like A and B and C, go down the list and it would have the coordinate of the country there. That was my first program I think I ever wrote doing that. So when you think about GIS, it's not quite GIS, but it was geographic in nature. That would have been like 1986, 1987. I didn't even know what GIS was. I just knew that I liked that kind of stuff and it was fun. Fast forward a couple of years, I ended up at Penn State in 1991. So kind of still pre-internet. So I ended up there and, when I came out of high school, I really didn't, but in my mind, there were two things you could do in college, business or engineering. And I didn't like engineering. I didn't like math. I didn't like that type of stuff. So I ended up going into business and did that for a while, my freshman year, most of my sophomore year. And I think it was in my, my fifth semester. So my junior year, beginning of my junior year, I had an economics class and I was sitting in this class and it had, the classroom actually had a plastic relief map up on the wall, a raised relief map with a USGS quad. And I just found myself just staring at that thing every class. I wasn't paying attention to class. I was just looking at this map and it's like, this is what I want to do. And so I went back to my dorm room and tried to figure out what that major was. And at Penn State, you were issued what was called, we used to call it the Blue Bible. It was about the size of a Bible and about that thick. And those were all the majors and the requirements for every major. So I'm flipping through this, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I landed on geography. I was like, this is cool. So I'll start taking some geography class. So I ended up dropping that class. And I think taking a geography class instead, it was, just a human geography class, but it was the only one I could get into at the time. And that started my path down the world of geography, GIS. That's right at the beginning. This would have been in 1993 or so, 94, right at the beginning of GIS really being taught in school. There wasn't a GIS degree. Even in geography, there wasn't, at Penn State, they had emphases, and they didn't even have an emphasis at that time on GIS. So I ended up in urban and regional planning because I like the plan. I like planning. I like maps. I like that type of stuff. So I ended up in that kind of subgroup of geography. I did 5.5 years. So I did an internship after my year before I started my senior year before I started my super senior year. And I did an internship with the Clearfield County Planning Commission, which is the county I grew up in Pennsylvania. And great, great time there. The planning director was only a couple years older than me. I think I was 22, 23. He might have been 26, 27. So we clicked, pretty well. And he's like, "Hey man, there's this computer in the back here that no one ever uses. I think there's a GIS program on there. I don't even know. You can go play with that and figure out what we can do with it." So that was my introduction really to GIS. No, I shouldn't say my introduction to GIS. That was my hands-on introduction. So this computer didn't even have Windows on it. It had DOS, whatever version of DOS, and had like Map Info version 2 something on
Okay.
it with the DOS version of Map Info. So I ended up playing with that all summer and doing stuff and creating maps and doing things, and came back that fall, and I think I took all GIS classes that fall before I graduated, and whenever I could take. And I started off the very first GIS class I ever took. You might remember this was Atlas GIS. Was it? That's
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
So Esri bought it at some point in the '90s and just killed it. But it was one of the only PC-based GIS programs. Everything was on a Spark station. You had ArcInfo on a Spark station. You had, well, that was the big one. You really didn't have much open source. You had, a few things like Atlas and a few things like MapInfo, which were on the PC, but you really didn't find those in academics
Right.
at all. So that was my experience. I took an ArcInfo class. I took an ArcView class. That was the other thing on PC was ArcView. So my super senior semester, took a bunch of those classes, and
Because that's about time ArcViews started getting popular.
yeah, that would have been the end of 1995. So I graduated in December of 95, took those classes. And when I graduated from there, this is like, the internet just happened around then, right? So like when I started school in 1991, no one had internet access. No one had PCs. No one ever knew what a PC was, right? So if you had to do anything computer wise, you had to go to the computer lab and get on the mainframe. And I had an email address, but never used it. And it only worked, I think, inside the university. So you can only ever email anybody inside the university. By the time I graduated, I had a PC on my desktop. A lot of people did. Penn State had dial up internet access for free, which was one of the first universities in the country to have that. So I could do from my fraternity house where I was living, I could dial up off campus and get into things. But at that time, there were still, news groups were a big thing. And think of them today, for folks listening to this now, sort of like job boards.
Oh,
But
yeah,
they
yeah.
were very topics, right? So you could post anything out there in these news groups, but they were run specifically for jobs. And I posted my resume out there, and someone from Rand McNally found my resume and gave me a call and said, "Hey, we'd like to interview you." And they flew me out, and I went to Chicago and interviewed and came back and kind of did the dance of interviewing for a while. And they ended up offering me a job, and I moved to. So this would have been in 1995. Moved to Chicago and started working for Rand McNally, which, as geographers, everybody's probably pretty familiar with. They're
Ram
especially the
McNally
road
maps.
atlas. Yeah. So it was a great opportunity to work there. It was a time of transition there as well. So you still had the road atlas, which was the big thing. They actually ran 3 shifts of cartographers on the road atlas at that time. And then they had the real artists, the guys and gals that created the tabletop world atlas books that were all done by hand, shaded relief by hand, all that kind of stuff. And then you had us upstart young people in this group called New Media. And we were producing software products. There were 3 that I worked on when I was there. They had a couple others too. They had a screensaver, which were, big back then too. Like people would actually
Yeah.
pay money for screensavers,
Right.
believe it or not. They had a couple other things too, a couple games. But the 3 big ones were TripMaker, which was,
Oh, yeah.
routing creating your route
Yep.
for your trip, and you would print it out and take
I
it with
say
you.
print it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was Street Finder, which was they couldn't put the detailed street level stuff on the same application with the same application as the routing because it was too much data to put on one CD. So they put TripMaker and Street Finder in two different products, and Street Finder you load up and you just be able to like search addresses and points of interest and things like that. And the third one was the New Millennium World Atlas, which was way ahead of its time. It had a 3D spinnable globe about 10 years before Google Earth. It was really cool, really cool. And they produced a lot of content. There were a lot of researchers that produced a lot of content for that. So you could click on the globe and, get a lot of information. It was an encyclopedic atlas is what it was. It was
Yeah.
really cool opportunity to work there. And that kind of set me up. I got involved with that. That's where I started really getting into GIS because I worked as a GIS analyst, writing map info, map basic code, believe it or not, to help manage points of interest and database, the line work and the routing. And I created a tool to be able, one of the things I wanted to do in TripMaker was to be able to, you could download a construction file, like where long-term construction was, or there were road closures. So I developed this tool in Map Basic for an analyst to go in and create those blockages on those roads. And then
Okay.
users could like update when they did it before they ran a route to make sure they weren't going, through a road that was closed. So that was the analyst was, they were already doing part of it already because Graham McNally ran a program. Well, you're probably familiar with it, the DoD side of things with DTOD.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Able official distances used to be just basically Rand McNally's PC Miler is what it was. In recent years, it's been ALK's product has been that similar product. PC Miler goes back to the 1970s, where it was a mainframe driven program at the time, where you would literally be a trucker and you would call up and say, "Hey, I'm going from Abilene to Jackson, Mississippi," and then they would figure out, okay, this is the official mileage. This is what you're doing. This is the roads you're going to take. And they create that out. They create that and they called it a triptych. So is this literally, the AAA started doing them where you have this like long map, just your route
Right.
on a rectangular piece of paper that would fold out that you could have in your vehicle. So they started doing that in the 70s. So that group still existed at the time. And they did all these construction updates. So they really wanted it for the truckers more than for the casual person using TripMaker. So I built that tool, and it's funny story about that. So fast forward to 2013, 2014, we get hired by Rand McNally as a consultant. This time, Rand McNally is a little different type of company. It's been sold a couple of times. Back when I worked there, was the McNallys were still running it.
Okay.
But we've been through like 5 different private equity firms that owned them. And, they shrunk down quite a bit, and they brought GeoDecisions on as a consultant to come in. We helped them transform them over to a complete ArcGIS cartographic environment. But we also did a bunch of other work there too. So they're taking us through the steps of all the things they have. And they're like, yeah, we have this Map Basic program that runs the construction stuff, and we don't know who wrote it. And it's been here for 15 years. And I was like, I wrote it 15 years ago. I can tell you all about it. So it was kind of funny it was almost 20 years at that point. But they were still using it at that point
Wow.
for construction stuff for their mile maker product. So it was kind of interesting.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That long. Yeah.
Yeah, for a long time. And I ended up there and then came back to, I lived in Chicago for 3 years, 4 years. I can't remember how long. Loved it there. Great time there. But I was getting homesick at the time and I wanted to come back, and I started looking for jobs back in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, the Western Pennsylvania area.
So are you with GeoDecisions at this time?
No. So I was at Rand McNally at that point. So graduated, looking for a job, got it. And then, I ended up getting an opportunity with GeoDecisions at the time. So this was in 1999. So I come on board at GeoDecisions as just a GIS analyst or GIS developer, really. And I didn't really have anything I was doing the first, couple months I was working there. I was just doing odds and ends and things. And I came back to State College, Pennsylvania. So GeoDecisions, to give you the brief story of GeoDecisions, was a spinoff from Penn State University back in the mid 80s. And Gannett Fleming was an engineering company, ended up buying GeoDecisions in 1992 and making that kind of their GIS group at that time. And at that time, there were only about 30 people in GeoDecisions. It wasn't a big company,
Oh,
wasn't a
wow.
big group. Most of the people were in State College. And so I was there in 99. And eventually I got assigned to this job they needed people to work on. And I remember the person that ran the job, they used to call it Mitmac. And Mitmac, and I was like, yeah, I'm working on this Mitmac job. Well, what it was Mitmac was Military Transportation Management Command.
Yeah.
What became STDC a few years later. And so that was Iris, initially Iris. So I started doing work on that. I did kind of like a lot of the stuff around the edges of it. So I built some really cool tools with some early wireless development stuff with cell phones,
Yeah.
having some information, being able to on not even like on a real screen. I mean, it was just like a Nokia,
So
type of
your little
cell
flip phone.
flip phones. Yeah, we had you could do 60 characters or whatever. So I was doing some stuff with that and doing some back end stuff, creating maps and just GIS support work. And then 9/11 happened. So 9/11 happened. I would have been with GeoDecisions a little less than 2 years at that point. Phew. That was an interesting story unto itself because I wrote a program to take like an off the shelf GPS unit, literally a Garmin old school GPS unit you could buy at Walmart or Bass Pro or wherever, and then pairing up with a PC that had at the time was a wireless, cell phone card on it. It could send GPS points back. So I created this whole
Cool.
whole thing. And
So
so
what were you developing this in at that time?
all that stuff was done in VB6.
Oh, wow.
So believe it or not, before .NET, before that world, this was in VB6. And it was using map objects in VB6.
Okay.
So as we map objects in VB6. And so I had a console developed with map objects so you could see the dot map and you could push that information out to GIS or into a database. But it was, the laptop was hooked to a GPS and to a cellular card. And that cellular card would push these positions back to a database, which then we could see on the web. So we had an ArcIMS set up where we were, breadcrumb tracking vehicles. And so we were given a test to do. It was a convoy that was going from Fort Eustis, Virginia to Yuma, Arizona and back. So I went down to Fort Eustis, Virginia and set them up with this thing and was like, all right, guys, see you in a few weeks. I'm going on vacation. So I head out I flew out to Denver, met up some friends. We did some hiking out there in Rocky Mountain National Park. And so I'm coming back. My birthday is September 9th. So I was out there for my birthday. That was a Sunday. Monday was September 10th. I fly back on the red eye on September 10th out of Denver. So I fly from Denver to Philadelphia. I land in Philadelphia about 6:30, something like that in the morning. And then had an 8:30 flight or a little after 8 o'clock flight, pop up to State College, which is only about 40 minutes. I land in State College and it's like 8:30. This is right in the middle of everything.
Yeah.
And on the radio, they're talking about it. So I was heading to the office because I was going to have to fly to Yuma to help them out a little bit. So I was heading to the office directly, get to the office. Everybody's talking about, plane hit the World Trade Center and there were a bunch of us talking about it. We're like, we're all history buffs and geographers were like, oh yeah, plane B-17 hit the Empire State Building in World War II and it was fine. And, and so then we hear that there was a second plane hit. So we go over, our office at that time was in a complex called Innovation Park, which was run by Penn State. It was an office park, but the Penn State Hotel was next door to us. And we went over there because they had a TV in our lobby. So we went over there and saw what was going on. And then we heard about the Pentagon being hit. And so we called our client. They're like, shut everything down. At that time we were hosting everything for SDDC at the time, or Mitmic. And they're like, shut everything down. We're just going to take a precautionary, effort. We don't know what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And then that sped things up, for me. At that point, they wanted somebody down at Fort Eustis, and I was young and single at the time. And, they said, come on down. So I went, so that would have been in early 2002. I started doing kind of like 2 weeks there, weekend home, 2 weeks, going back and forth, going back and forth. And eventually ended up buying a house here and meeting my now wife and having a 20-year-old and a almost 17-year-old. So I've been here ever since. So
Well,
I
that's
really,
been
set
there
the
a while
course.
then.
Yeah, it's been going on 23 years I've been here in this area. So
So how long were you ended up being with GeoDecisions?
almost, almost 25 years.
Wow.
So,
Mm.
uh,
So in
I got to work on
GeoDecisions, you kind of moved your way up a little bit there too.
yeah. So at that point and I was fortunate to choose this. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and a lot of it. So moved down here, I moved up to becoming running this program, IRIS, Intelligent Road Rail Information System.
As
It
military,
became,
you got to have a long acronym.
yeah, I got to have a long acronym and, it became a little, 50, $60,000 program to several $1 million a year program over time and ran about 20 years. So, as IRIS, and then it transformed to the Transportation Geographic Information System and still is in use today in some form or fashion. So
Yeah,
it's still there.
we might call it that.
But we had that and so throughout that time, I think in 2004, they asked me to kind of run that from a perspective of all, not just Iris, but all of our military work that we had. So from a technical perspective, running that, and I did that. Director of Military Solutions, I think was my title. And then eventually I got promoted to VP of Military Solutions. And then in 2010 or so, we had some people leave the firm and there was a big shakeup. Our president at the time moved up. He actually, Bob Scare became president of Gannett Fleming, our parent company. So there's a big shakeup of things moving at that time. And I got the opportunity then in 2012 then to become president of GeoDecisions. So I spent almost 13 years in that role as president and got to do some cool things as president too and be involved in things. GeoDecisions did some cool things and, other things besides Iris. There was, Fishity, which I don't know if you remember Fishity.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes. Fishity.
Was one of the employees kind of came up with it, didn't he?
Yep. Yeah. So we had a program in Gannett Fleming. It's called the Cooperative Research and Innovation Center, which as a second hat I wore as well, running that group, which was a virtual group, really. It was nobody's first job. And the reason I got to wear that hat is because almost everything that came through there had a geospatial component to it. So GeoDecisions ended up being the executors of a lot of these great ideas that came from employees. And Fishity was one of them. Fishity was at the time, right when Facebook was coming out. So there was this social media, mapping, angling, website that you go out and plan your fishing trips and look at really cool maps that had a lot of fishing information, as well as then share your information out in a social media type platform in a secure way. So if you want to share with some people, you could, but not everybody. We seeded that in Gannett Fleming, did that for several years, and then eventually spun it out, got angel funding and venture capital funding, ran that. It ran on its own for about 4 years. And I served on the board of directors during that time. And then we sold to FLIR. So FLIR has a number of companies. People mostly know FLIR because of their imaging products.
Thermal,
I think.
yeah.
Thermal imaging products, but they also own a bunch of other stuff, including geospatial. They own the Hummingbird line of fish finders. So they bought Fishity. At that time, it was just the right timing in the market where everybody was buying up data. So Garmin had got into the market big time and it bought up a company called Navion, which is another company, not to be confused with Navionics, but Navion.
Right.
It bought another mapping company. And then FLIR decided that and Hummingbird wanted to get their hands on Fishity because we had great data. We were partnered with Fishing Hotspots, which is a upper Midwest, paper map company that did fishing hotspot mapping for years. It was, great little companies. They bought us and Fishing Hotspots at the same time. So really interesting stuff. It's still going on now. Brian Jensen, who was the employee that came up with it, ended up being the founder and struggling founder, and did all the legwork and did all the pitches. Got rewarded. They bought it, and he made some money on it, and now is
Good.
the CEO of that group within FLIR. So he's still there with it. This has been that started in 2009-ish, and we spun it off in 2014. So he's been there for quite a long time now. So
Yeah, it's about 10 years now.
yeah, 10 years he's been there. So it's interesting stuff. So, but did that, and then the latest one that's still kind of in the funding aspect of things is ESP technology, logistics technology, which is really a game changer in how we approach supply chain problems from a geographic perspective. And it's a partnership between GeoDecisions, Esri, and a private equity firm called Saybrook Partners out in LA. And I still am involved with that. I'm not only an investor, but I sit on the board with that as well and help advise them. Um, we had several employees from GeoDecisions because it kind of was seated within GeoDecisions. A lot of the technology we used in Iris, a lot of those folks went over and worked with ESP, left GeoDecisions to do that. We did it with our blessing
Right.
to go over there and get that moving forward. And it's been going really well right now. So we're in the process now of acquiring more funding and moving forward, and more, growing the business, and hopefully eventually, we'll eventually sell it at some point, but uh, doing great stuff.
Good.
So that brings me to today, right? So like pretty close here. So I left GeoDecision. So Gannon Fleming, our parent company, was bought by a private equity firm at the end of 2022. And I was a partner within Gannon Fleming as well. And was fortunate enough to as we did that, it became the right time after 18 months or so for me to move on and do some different things, and to take that opportunity I was given to do something different. So I went to a company called GeoCGI, which is a great woman-owned small business company, mainly in the defense space. I really went there to help them with their work with NASA, and that's been great. NASA Langley Research Center is right near my home. It was a perfect fit. Worked out great, and really enjoyed working with the folks there and doing some things. But I'm moving on from there now too.
Yeah. So what are you doing these days?
I've decided to hang out my own shingle, and I'm going to do a little bit of consulting with firms, private equity firms that are looking to invest in GIS technologies and GIS companies. And I'm also going to be working with the local angel investment group here in Hampton Roads, called 757 Angels, which does investment in technology companies and other companies as well, but technology companies in particular. And they're one of the better angel investment firms in the country, or angel investment groups in the country. So real excited about that. And I don't know if I'll call it semi-retirement or what, but it's definitely not a 9 to 5 type job. I'm looking forward to having a little more free time and doing some other things that I want to do. So
Well, they say that about founders. Founders, you kind of
yeah,
think you're going to go out and just work when you want to work. It doesn't work that way.
no, it's
But now
24
you'll be in a
hours a day.
place where you have maybe a little bit more options for that.
Yeah, it's 24 hours a day for those folks and doing things, and then just, I haven't truly been a founder, but I've been around them and working, working with these startup companies and working with stuff that we've done within the GeoDecisions. And it's a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of
It
effort, a
is.
lot of time in airplanes, a lot of sleepless nights, and it's, at some point you gotta take a step back. So,
Yes, you do. So,
but
so
yeah,
that sounds pretty exciting as far as
yeah,
where you want to go with all this. And so, one of the things I hear in your stories too,
yeah,
you started off, you did a lot of the programming side, which I hear this
yeah.
from a lot of different people. You know, of what is what you probably run into this question before, especially early on in your career. I still get this. My wife still asks me this. So, what is it you do? You
Exactly.
know,
My wife
a
just gave
lot
me
of
some
people.
today. She was like, "I've
Yeah,
been married to you for 22 years, and I still don't know what you do."
yeah. It's like, and everybody's like, "What do you do in GIS?" And I always found it very exciting, and and your career kind of shows that is there's
Yeah.
so many things that you can do because, if whether you have some programming skills or not, there's just so many different directions you can go. So you started off, you had
Yeah.
some programming skills that kind of helped you get introduced a little bit. Uh, and I think the
Yeah.
other thing too is that business interest. Later you kind of get you kind of end your career more on that business focus side rather than technical side, but
Yeah.
you're able to still keep that contact with the technical side of it, which I'm sure has been pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Um, so what are some of the, looking back on some of this time, what were maybe some of your memorable projects that you were able to apply GIS or geospatial technology to that you found very interesting and also,
Yeah.
kind of seemed like it had an impact?
That's a great question. It's, I think, going back to what you were saying before, I think from the programming aspect of things, when we started in GIS, you almost had to program to be able to do anything worthwhile, right? You had to know a little bit of our macro language, AML or Avenue or something to be able to make the system work and do what you wanted to do. Yeah, you could be a technician and just kind of move lines around and stuff like that. That was there. But in order to truly do GIS work, you really needed to understand that programming aspect. And that's where I got into it. And I'm sure you got into it as well too. And so that led to some interesting things because we used to be able to, and you did, I'm sure as well too. You had to push the software to do stuff it didn't do. And
Oh
so
yeah,
like one of the first things that I remember, getting the software to do what it didn't do was really before ArcIMS was a stable product. It took a while for ArcIMS to be a stable product.
it did.
We actually took, I think it was just Map Objects LT. So remember they had the two versions of
Oh
Map
yeah, yeah.
Objects? We took Map Objects LT and wrote a wrapper around it to be able to output images to a file or to a file folder. And we were displaying those images. So back in the day, you were showing just images up and as you pan across. We were just basically using Map Objects LT to be able to output images and display them in a frame and use that as a web server.
It's kind of a magic show.
Yeah, it was kind of a magic show because ArcIMS just wasn't stable enough to do what we wanted to do. So we were pushing the software to do more of what we wanted to do. And that was one of my first experiences with taking GIS technology and being able to make it do what I want to do. Just taking it to the next level, doing anything on the web at that time in the late 90s, early 2000s with with GIS technology was cutting edge. No one was really doing it. As technologies were, okay at best. There wasn't a whole lot out there. That's when kind of the open source movement started coming into play. You had, Open Web Map and you had, was it Map Layers? I think
Map
it was
server and
Map Server. They started being produced at that time to kind of fill a gap and being able to use that for those different things. But, I think, in terms of the coolest things, going back to Ray McNally, being able to do that cool stuff with GIS data, taking that data from Map Info and then putting it into a commercial product and being able to show GIS data in a commercial product was pretty cool at the time. For a period of time too, I worked doing work in we had some work in the 911 business. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s was when first generation, they called it enhanced 911, where the computer aided dispatch systems were built and were basically built on GIS. And being able to develop some tools to be able to do that. We did when I was first at GeoDecisions, we did Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, which is Pittsburgh area, all the municipalities there. And we did a bunch of work there with Allegheny County on developing their computer aided dispatch system using GIS and using the GIS base mapping system, which was pretty cool. Pretty cool time. It was one of the first ones in the country that was doing that using AIRSRE technology. At that time, a lot of it was being done by Intergraph, the major competitor at the time to
yeah,
Intergraph. I think that was even before GeoMedia even came out. So it was still NGE, Intergraph NGE,
right.
that type of thing. So it was a pretty cool project to work on, be able to implement that technology, and a truly life-saving application, right? So that was fun. Let's see, I mentioned Fishity, I mentioned Iris. Those are all truly, technology type bleeding edge type things. So there've been lots of different things out there. We always thought that building, our job was to help our clients and our customers be able to do what they wanted to do. And a lot of times what they wanted to do wasn't available by the technology. So you had to build it and you had to manipulate the technology to make it work. So lots of opportunities to do that. I encourage folks out there now that are listening to this, that are young, that's really take the technology and be able to make it do things that it can't do for your customers and for your clients and for your bosses. I mean, that's really the fun part about it. It's making it do stuff it's not supposed to do.
And there's a lot of opportunity to do that. I guess, especially in your role, back when you were in GeoDecisions, you probably worked with a lot of different staff with a lot of, different backgrounds. So, that's one of the things I tell people in the geospatial industry. It's not just geographers. It's not just GIS focused people. There's so many different opportunities, whether it's, computer science, business,
Yep.
You even mentioned back when you were Rand McNally,
Yeah.
the artistry, when you're making a final product, GIS is a great product. I mean, it's a great tool, I should say, but you still need that artistry. You need some better tools
Yep.
to make a final looking product that's going to be worthy of media print and things of that nature. Even today, while it's a lot better, I still think that, you need those tools to take it to that final stage.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree. And I'd say, too, that just that mindset, some of the best technology folks I work with were fine arts majors in college, musicians and artists and things like that decided they really like technology as well, too. And got to know the technology side of things. And that's where they work now. But they had that, what is it, your left side of your brain?
Yeah. Then the creative side.
Creative side of your brain.
Yeah.
Very active for them. And they do a great job. So,
And they definitely bring in a different perspective.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So, with all that, kind of a lead into that, we've already done that is, you're sitting at this, imagine you're sitting in front of a room of students and, people just starting out in their careers. Do you have any other words of wisdom that you would probably share with them?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think that, if you're just, if you're in discovery, they call geography and GIS the ultimate discovery major. At least at Penn State, and I think it's true for other schools. Most people don't enter it as a freshman. They do like you and I did, Kelly. They end up somewhere along the line. They find it along the way and they enter it. And, and they're very happy there and they think it's great and they love it. I think I still think that's true today too, across the board, not just at Penn State. But I think it's part of that too. I think that you really need to, if you want to develop a career in GIS and in geospatial technologies, you got to be curious, number one. And number two, even if you don't like the program, you got to learn a little Python. You got to learn a little something to be able to make your job easier. Because that's, just part of the tricks of the trade. You got to be able to do that, and everything's built around that. So taking some time, where I find most of the people, they come into the business as GIS analysts or GIS specialists, and are doing data creation or they're doing some simple tasks. They usually delve into two avenues, right? Or maybe three. They go the analyst route, more analytical things, the high end, more, environmental analysis or spatial analysis type stuff, which is great. They get into, artificial intelligence and deep learning and machine learning. That's a great path to take today, but you still got to learn some Python. You still got to do some things that way. Others go into project management and wanting to manage things. That's kind of self-explanatory. And then the third path is really on the development side where, that's kind of the path I took. Was I really wanted to be more hands-on building things, than analyzing things or doing things. There was a crossover in the AI side of things between those high-end GIS geospatial analysts and software developers. But there's room for both there for sure. And it doesn't necessarily take 100% technical mind to do that. I find that in the geospatial, in the geospatial world, you can't just be a software developer. You got to know that the spatial analytics side of things, because you got to think that way. That's the important thing. It's easier to take to take a geographer, geospatial analyst and teach them software development than it is to take a software developer and teach them the spatial side of things. Although we try to do it both ways.
Yeah. They kind of need to know what is that mindset of the person using it. And like you said,
Yeah,
I think one of the things we find in the geospatial world is there is a big influence of that creative mind side.
absolutely.
It's looking, when you think about geography, we're looking at broad areas and trying to see how things connect. And, you have to be able to imagine boundaries, that there's not a physical boundary there, but you got to be able to understand that distinction. So it takes that creative mindset, I think. And when you're trying to develop a solution for that, you need that input, I think.
Yeah, you have to be able to think linearly, I guess is the best way to describe it.
I
And
would agree.
that's not something that it's something that's difficult for some people to think differently, but yeah, and I think that those are the biggest things. You got to be curious. You got to be, just want to learn. The most successful people I see are people who want to continue to learn and find out new things. And if you want to come to work every day and work your 9 to 5 or whatever, that's fine. You can do that. But I don't think you're going to be as happy as if you are curious and excited about geography and geospatial stuff, and doing that work. You're going to do, if you're excited about that stuff, you're going to want to go out and do these things and find different ways to apply the technology.
I agree. I think one of the things, with our careers expand, the time that we put in here, 30 years or so,
Yeah.
we've seen a lot of change. And I think it's one of those things that, we're talking about a long-term careers here, but that change has been very rapid still within there. And, GIS hasn't settled down. I think it's
No.
still growing. Now AI's come into the picture and it's getting
Yeah.
in there as well. Where do you see the future of geospatial going, like in the next few years?
But it's good. It's, already started. I think, 10 years ago, I was calling it the democratization of geospatial, right? It's getting into everything, Google Maps and Bing Maps and all these things. Everybody's using it every day. They just don't know it all the time, that they're using and benefiting from it. Today it's just accelerating, right? You really don't have a true AI model unless you're taking geospatial into account. So as those things move forward and you're able to do that in ChatGPT and other models that are out there, it only makes it better, when you can do that. The day-to-day aspects of things where you don't even realize that you're using geospatial technology is gonna be there. It's become mainstream a lot. The technology itself is becoming mainstream, which is a big key. Even Esri's acknowledged that. You from your time at Esri and my time with, we were working with it forever. It used to be kind of distinct, right? But Esri's kind of gone to this thing now, the well-architected framework. They talk about things in terms of IT, not in terms of geospatial. They got rid of the bubble graphs and the little Esri specific things to make it look like IT people are used to having it look like. But that's just the next step in evolving, that it's becoming more and more mainstream. But, it makes your life easier. I think for people who are not, you and I are spatial type people, we think spatially, but not everybody thinks that way. So if you can put in their hands and let them use spatial tools without having to be a spatial person, that makes everybody's life easier.
Oh, I totally agree. You know, we think about GIS, you probably experience this a lot, is when you get involved with it, everybody's like, well, make me a map. Well, there's a lot of GIS that never make a map. You're answering a lot of questions and
Sure.
you're coming up with some data and some additional information, but don't always make a map. So yeah,
The map's
it's
just one out,
really, it
you know?
is.
Yeah.
There are so many aspects to GIS. And I think that's what makes it a very interesting career.
Yeah.
Uh, I know I've really enjoyed it, and I know you've enjoyed your careers so far as
Yeah.
well.
I'm lucky. And I think, we both are lucky, but I feel I'm particularly lucky because I've got to do something I love for my entire career, basically. So, yes, I don't think a lot of people get to do that. And, I've been fortunate. So very happy.
Get to do what you like, but also see the growth that it's done from the days when you're like, what is GIS? And
Yeah.
trying, nobody's out there recognizing it to where it is today. It's pretty exciting.
It is. It is. It is for sure. Yeah. Back,
So
when Esri was doing Super Bowl commercials, a couple years ago, that was great. Got a lot of people, got a lot of technology, and people don't understand what GIS is out there, but they kind of fell off that and stopped advertising
yeah,
to the general public. So
because the general public was like, "What are these people?
yeah,
What's
what are they
going on
doing?
here?" We got it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so Brian, I want to touch on something we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
uh, and I thought it's kind of interesting. We were talking about what were some of your influences of
Yeah.
geospatial, and you mentioned your mom actually, you know,
Yeah.
knew a little bit
Well,
maybe about GIs before you.
yeah. Yeah. Actually, she did. It was funny because my mom was the director of tax claim and, director of tax claim and the chief assessor, property assessor for the county I grew up in Pennsylvania. And so the mapping department fell under her. So that was cadastral mapping, property mapping type of thing. So she was very aware of what GIS was. They had a small GIS group at that time. I think they might have had one license of ArcInfo, one person doing a little bit of work. It was still very manual cadastral mapping program type stuff, producing plot maps and plat maps, I should say, and those type of things. But yeah, she was aware of it, but she was also very wary of it too. Only aware, but also wary. So I remember when I called her, uh, when I said, "Hey mom, I found what I want to do, finally." And she's like, "Well, you're in your fifth semester of school, you need to settle down and figure out what you want to get." I was like, "I'm going to do geography. I'm switching to geography." And there was just silence on the other end of the phone. And I was like, "So that's pretty cool. I'm really excited about this." She's, "What are you going to do with this? You going to teach? What are you going to do? You can't get a job doing this stuff." I was like, "Yeah, I think I can. I think I can do it. I think this is something I want to do. I'll figure it out." And 30 years later, I think I've figured it out. So
Got a good idea anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, well,
Late
really
bloomer.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's funny when you see these little breadcrumbs from past life that, how it all kind of takes you to where you're at.
yeah,
Now, I'm sure when
for
you were
sure.
first starting out, you probably didn't ever imagine that you would have ended up, in the roles that you've been able to serve in.
No, no, never, never. I was just happy if I had a job. At first, I was like, "Well, I can make a career in this. Then, I can do this." But I've been very fortunate throughout my life, been given opportunities and be able to take them and to be able to do different things. So I'm very fortunate for sure. So, now in my later part of my career, I just want to give back. That's what I want to do. Help out people that are entering the field, help out others who want to be involved and kind of be, an evangelist for geographers and geospatial folk as a whole. So,
Well, good. That's kind of what I hope this podcast is going to allow us to do. I'm kind of in the
yeah,
same boat, and yeah, I'm sure you're in the same mindset here. To me, that's just as exciting as when you're starting out. It's like,
yeah,
you know, being able to share that information.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Very cool.
Brendan, do you have anything else you want to share with us? Or
Yeah, I think I've talked quite a bit here, but yeah, I hope anybody listening to this, they get some inspiration, not just from me, but from others throughout your podcast here. I think this is a great thing you're doing, Kelly, and really, as I said before, I'm very honored to be here and flattered that you asked me to participate in this. So thank
well,
you
right
so
back
much.
at you. I'm glad you responded to say, "Yeah, I'll do that."
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
No, this is fun. It's nice that I get to catch up with some old friends and people that I've known for a
Yep.
long time, and be able to share with other people. I think it's really cool. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you taking the
likewise.
time and agreeing to do this podcast and being here and sharing your story.
Absolutely.
Um,
Love to come back. Maybe I'll come back later on and we can talk about other things. So,
yeah. So for our listeners out there, is there, if they want to find out more about what you're doing and where you're going,
yeah.
how can they find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. You can just search me. I'm, a pretty unique name, Brendan Wesdock, Wesdock. Anybody with that last name, I know personally, we're all cousins. I'm descended from Slovak immigrants. My grandparents came from Slovakia, and it was Hvizdak in the old world. And so they Americanized it for my dad's generation coming here. So,
Oh, wow.
so easy to find. I also, as I mentioned, I've put out my own shingle now. The name of my company is Whistler Advisory Services. And the reason it's called Whistler is because Wesdock in Slovak means whistler or whistle maker. So
Interesting.
yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. So whistleradvisory.com. You can reach me there, as well as Brendan at whistleradvisory.com. So
Very good. Well, again, I really appreciate your time. I know everybody's going to enjoy listening to your story, and hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast soon, and we'll talk about other topics out.
love to. Thanks, Kelly, so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, Brendan, we'll talk to you soon, and we'll end it here. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right. You too. Bye. Thanks for joining us on the Spatial Connection podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. You can also follow us on social media and visit our website for updates, resources, and behind-the-scenes content. Do you know someone with a fascinating geospatial story? If so, send us a message. We'd love to hear about them. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep exploring the world through the lens of geospatial technology.